So I'm going to talk about identities and accounts and how the two aren't the same thing. And if this is assume you've got like customers or citizens or somebody, patrons, I don't know. And the idea is that we're going to talk a little bit about identities and then what an account means with like an authentication account and not like a bank account. And then a bunch of things ripple out of the identities and what products you have, those kinds of things, and what kind of permissions you end up. And then as long as we're sitting on the account side, security account side, we can talk about credential interchange and those kinds of things. So let's talk about identity first. That's our world, in our world, understanding of what we know about a person or what we think is a person or what we think is a company. Doesn't really matter the entity type, right? That this is an identity for. So this is basically what we think we know about a person or a company or an org or something else in our world, right? And that those identities may have some data about them. You can typically think of these as like, you know, your demographic information, name, address, phone number, any kind of preferences you got, any kind of other settings, disclaimer, releases, whatever. It's kind of what we know about this person. And it could be that you don't necessarily know who this person is in the real world. Matter of fact, in a lot of places, unless you're a bank, even then, it's a good thing to assume that you don't really know who this is in the world, in the real world. So let's going to assume that this is in our world. This is a person who has a gym membership. This is a person who does something. In the banking world, they think they know who they're talking to because they use social security numbers, but there wouldn't be any bank fraud if that was true. And that would be on the security side and the account side. So the other thing that's weird about identities is identity resolution. You can have the same person come in on multiple paths, and it may be that you don't know it's the same person. I bought 300 million names and all their addresses. I bought the dead list, right? I bought something else. And so those identities that come in through various channels need to be resolved so that you know which ones represent the same one in our world. Right, so those are identities, and they can have an ID, and an identity ID is not the same as an account ID, because you can have a person who is a customer who has no online account, no security account with you, but they still exist as an identity. And then at some time later, they might have one or more channels of security accounts. So let's talk about security account. Security account only exists within the concept of being bound to an identity. And that identity could be any type, could be a customer, could not be a customer, could be a taxpayer. Don't know what it is. But the security account is the authentication shell that exposes, that lets us try and identify which identity that we're talking to, and then we can decide later what they're allowed to do. But that's the security account. It gives us confidence in who we're in contact with. And for my purposes, security account is really about having an account. And then you'll have this authentication piece, and we may have identity recovery. Really, if you think about doing account recovery, it's really the security account recovery, and that's going to bind us to a different identity. And so the idea here is that whenever somebody's authenticated or we bring them in through some security account, that it's the same person in our world every time we talk to that person that's on that account. So we could have people that never have accounts. Those would be identities. We can have people that have identities and then have accounts with us because they want to interact with directly with us and have some level of authentication that's trusted. Could be like even on a DocuSign thing, right? That they have a temporary account that's bound to their identity. And Joe, me, I've actually had several different e-sign accounts because I've done different transactions through different places. But in the end, they're all bound back to me, hopefully. But maybe not, because those different companies wouldn't have the same identity representation for me. So that's identity is who this person is in our world. And we struggle with this identity resolution. Is this one person or two we're really talking to? Are they two of George Foreman's sons living in the same house? Do I know they're two sons? And that's what that identity resolution is. And we talked about the security account. So in a lot of cases, when we talk about identities and accounts, I've been in meetings where people get those two confused. And it's like, why would I need an identity when I have an account? Well, because not everybody has an account, right? And some accounts might represent transients, and they might be different identity pools. So the next one is roles, and roles or the roles you play. Like, I'm going to pretend you're a customer, so I could be an account holder, right? And so I would have certain permissions based on you being an account holder. But I might not, like a bank account, right? But I might not have a social security or a secret, or what do you call it, a safety deposit box. And so if those still exist. And so if I don't have a safety deposit box, or if I do, that might be some other relationship that they have with me. I'm like a checking account holder. I'm a savings account holder. I'm a safety deposit box holder. And those would be roles, and they might give me permissions. I might be able to do something remote, view the camera in the safety deposit box vault if I had a safety deposit box, but that would be dumb because then you could see other people in there. But the idea here is the roles are basically based on product relationships, so I have the ability to edit or be an owner of any savings account or checking account that is mine. I might have some general business rule that anybody who logs in with this level automatically has the ability to get a free credit score, right? And so because I have an account, I get a free credit score. We're buying business, a little contact info there. And then, so that might create different kinds of associations. And then the other kind of association that we could have would be an explicit. I have a lawyer who's going to take care of paying all my bills and any claims that I have. And so I could create an assignment or get an assignment. I could be a lawyer, and I could end up having legal or whatever it is capability on somebody else's account. Well, it probably would be related to their products, actually, right? So an account authenticates you to give you an identity, and that identity, we look up kind of what your roles are and what products you have, those kinds of things that give those associations to products, and any delegations gives you a set of roles. And then those roles actually map out to a set of entitlements that are specific to each application or business function. And so basically you take the roles and the associations, and on the fly, and then you can set that to a set of permissions, and then on the fly, based on some things, will actually change your entitlements. So I could have an entitlement as a credit card holder, and it turns out that if that credit card is closed, even though it's my credit card, based on the scope that I'm in, the state of that credit card that it's closed, I might be able to see owed bills, but not charge anything or do anything else with it. So those are the entitlements, right? So an identity. A security account lets us know what identity we're dealing with. That identity, based on their products, based on business rules, and based on delegations or other manual assignments, they could pick up a set of roles, and those roles are determined by different systems to what entitlements that role gives you within that system. Because some roles, if I'm credit card holder and I go to a checking system, I don't have any entitlements, right? Because the credit card doesn't give me any permissions in the checking account. So those would be the entitlements that are static and dynamic. And those are really the big four in a lot of ways. For the runtime, well, not really. I'll get to it. So the next part of this is really governance. I have these identities and accounts, and I have the roles that go with them and the entitlements that hang off of that. What kind of governance functions do I need for this, right? You could argue that maybe identity resolution is a governance in some cases, but basically we have an account rules. We've got authorization policies that would end up changing maybe what the entitlements are, or, you have to get it approved, right? A big one, especially if you're an internal user, is you end up having to be approved for different kinds of roles, which will map into different kinds of entitlements. And then delegation and approvals, we probably end up with delegation approval rules that are really managed by the governance system. So I have delegations, right? Those would be something like in a role or an association. I was given a delegation to be have power of attorney for this checking account, right? But there's governance around that. Like, I can't just go grab that permission myself. The person who's the owner of that bank account might have to give it to me, and so that would be a governance principle. And I put this last one in here because it feels kind of weird, but it's actually complicated in a lot of companies. And the question is, how are you going to pass around a person's identity or a person's permissions? And so, we need to know what the identity is in different systems of different ages. We may end up in an OBO flow. It could be multiple cloud providers or third-party systems. What is the method that the token type or whatever else we're going to use to pass those credentials around? And then what entitlements get passed in with that. So credential interchange and how that's going to work. I know it seems dumb and there's a couple standards out there, but some of them are kind of hard to use. And you also end up like in an API gateway or other situation, maybe a standard protocol, or you need a OBO pass through. It may not actually work the way you want. So those are like, to me, the big six, right? Identity is who we're operating with in our world. The security account lets us repeatedly think we know who that person is. When they're communicating with us, they pick up a set of roles based on their products and their product relationships and any business rules and explicit delegations that have been given to them. Those roles map into a set of entitlements that let them do what certain operations in different systems, and those entitlements vary by the system and the product that is they're interacting with at that time. And then we have governance around what the account rules are for like creating IDs and uniqueness and anything else, and authorization policies and how we're going to manage those authorization sets, basically the entitlements that come off the roles, and what kind of rules there are around delegations and approval. And then we need to know how we're going to stitch all that together at runtime. And I'm over time, and I hope that's worthwhile. Have a great day.